How you doing? This is Coach DeCarlo. Today we're going to be discussing a talk that Terence Howard had at the Oxford Union. And what we're going to do is use this talk to discuss manifestation because he says some very valid points. And I want to discuss these things as we move forward so that we can understand how manifestation takes place. Now, when I have Terence Howard talking by way of YouTube, the recording, what I'm going to do is move out the screen so that you can imagine Terence Howard actually being on the program. And maybe one day we'll have him here, but this is a very phenomenal man. He's very powerful, and I really didn't realize how bright and smart the man was until I started listening to some of his talks. I've always liked Terence Howard as an actor. I remember him, I first saw him on Richard Dreyfuss' Mr. Holland's Opus. And, from there, I just kind of started following the actor. But what I want to do is, like I said, I want to let Terence Howard speak. I'm going to move out the way when he's speaking. And again, this is coming from YouTube, so he's not actually at my home. We're not actually doing an interview today. Now, maybe in the future, this may be something that we can make happen. But the things that he says is so poignant when talking about manifestation that I think is going to transform your life. So I want to incorporate what it is that he's saying and how it applies to each one of us. Neville Goddard was great in manifesting and getting in states because of his past life as an actor. And Terence Howard is a great actor. If you get an opportunity, go to YouTube and look at his address to the Oxford Union, because that's where this is coming from. But guys, get ready for some very powerful teaching today. So let's go on and get started.
Well, I love acting, but there's some downfalls of it. A lot of actors end up with personality identity crisis and conflicts because you have so many characters you're playing. And if you really commit to the characters, you become like a piece of clothing. And the character has a tendency of wanting to own you. What you saw in Anthony Hopkins and Hannibal Lecter, that monster lives in him. That's why we believed it. He had to tap into something very ugly. And as an actor, sometimes I tap into beautiful things. But like with Lucius, and the character I play with Lucius, his life is filled with turmoil. So 90% of the day I'm walking around carrying his turmoil and also the turmoil from me and my own family. You will look at yourself one day and you won't know who you are because you don't remember who you were.
Like I said, that's some very powerful stuff, and I want to touch on it. And like I said, don't have Terence Howard. For those who are looking at actually having Terence Howard in the home or in the studio today, that's not the case. But I wanted to discuss this talk concerning manifestation. Now, Terence tells you, first and foremost, when you're looking at manifesting anything, listen to what he said initially. He said, listen, I love acting. Now, in the actual recording, he said half of the time, and that's life. We get into life and we sometimes enjoy what it is that we're doing, but other times we don't. But whatever we're giving that attention to, that's what's going to show up in our lives. So we have to be mindful as creators and be mindful of what it is that we're giving our attention to. Now, he said, listen, I love acting. He said, but acting in itself can be stressful. Creators, all of us are acting. Many of us are acting as if we're less than who God's created us to be. And a lot of that we're doing because we're fearful of what other people are going to think about us. So decide right now who it is that you want to be. Now, when I say that we're all acting, let me kind of give some history on what I mean by this. In the beginning, God said. Now, some of those people out there say, well, God didn't say anything, man said it. God speaks through the instrument of the human race. In the beginning, God said, let us make man, woman, in our image and our likeness. When we talk about the us and God, we're speaking of what we call the Elohim, the one made up of many. 8 billion people are expressing God in the world. Now, we're not gods in and of ourselves. It requires that we have God's spirit to do God things. And if we're living and breathing, then we can know that we have God's Spirit within us. So when I say that you are God's, I don't mean that you're this little tiny deity, on the top of the mountain saying, I am God, I am God, yeah, I am. No, no, no. You're God's because you're offsprings of God. You have God's Spirit in you. So now Terence says, listen, I love acting half of the time. But he goes on to say, but listen, when you're acting, this character that you put on, get what he's saying. He said, this character that you put on, it wants to control you. The character that we're talking about, that many actors are moving in and out of scene doing, is ego. We clothe spirit, the soul, and ego. And whatever it is that we say about self, that's what shows up in our world. And how do we say it? We say, I am. I am is the name of God. If you look in ancient script, it says, I am that I am. So whatever you're saying I am to, that's what's going to show up in your life. I'm not smart. I'm not loving. I'm not lovable. I'm not attractive. When you say I am, you're impregnating your spirit with that identity. And God says, be it unto you according to your faith. God is not going to stop you from being who it is that you're claiming to be. He's given you choice to say, I am this, I am that. And that's what actors do so well. Somebody was talking about, it was actually Dave Chappelle. He was doing a special, and he said when he was a kid, he loved Jim Carrey so much. And one of the other comedians that knew Jim Carrey knew that Jim Carrey was performing at a particular place, and he inquired with Dave, did he want to go meet Jim Carrey? Dave said, absolutely. So Dave went at a time where Jim Carrey was playing a character by the name of Andy Kaufman. For those who are old enough, Andy Kaufman played on Taxi, and he played this particular strange character on Taxi, but he was a very lovable, funny character. But Jim Carrey so loved Andy Kaufman that he decided to embody himself in the role. So when Dave Chappelle met Jim Carrey, he didn't meet Jim Carrey. He met Andy Kaufman. And Dave was so disappointed because he wanted to meet Jim Carrey, but Jim Carrey was still in role. And because he was in role, he was not coming out of character. This is many of us. Many of us think that, I'll never have a loving relationship. I'll never have abundance. I'll never have good health. Now, spirit knows no lack, loss, or limitation. But at the ego level, we call the body the five senses, this is where this occupies. And whatever, again, we go back to the I am, whatever we say about I am, that's what shows up in our world. So let's go back to listening to what it was that Brother Howard spoke on. So let's go on and listen to a little bit of this, because I want to touch on some of these things as we're going.
Well, I love acting, but there's some downfalls of it. A lot of actors end up with personality identity crisis.
I want to stop there because that's powerful. He said, listen, I love acting. He says, now, like I said, in the original clip, if you go to YouTube and you type in Terence Howard and you look at the address to the Oxford Union, this is where you'll get the full speech, full presentation. He says, but the problem with acting is that many actors start dealing with personality disorders. Now, why would that be? In a clinical, and no way am I a psychologist, this is not my profession, but from what I know, that when we start talking about schizophrenia and we start talking about mental illnesses and so forth, it's different people believing that they're different people that have been, who lived throughout time or whatever. Actors do this all the time.